All right, Henna, thank you. Have a great weekend. Don't go anywhere, though. Hello, welcome to the Hill on NewsNation. Tonight, seeing red all across the board. A massive sell-off and maybe a major warning sign. What happened today with the markets, what it means for your bank account, and the race for the White House. Kevin O'Leary joins us here in a few moments. Also this evening, a mea culpa from the Secret Service.
The Secret Service takes full responsibility for the tragic events of July 13th. This was a mission failure.
After the failed Trump assassination attempt, the agency now separating itself from local police, plus calling out his own party. Why one lawmaker says religion could influence Vice President Harris's VP pick. And the Olympics controversy, that's packing a punch. How a fight in Paris has some in Washington crying foul. We are speaking with George Foreman III coming up here on the Hill. It is 95 days until November 5th. Do you know who and what you're voting for? This is the Hill on NewsNation. All right, hello there. Good evening. I'm Blake Berman. It is the home stretch of the 2024 presidential race that has nearly seen it all, you could say, at least here in the last few weeks or so. But we are seemingly right back to the lesson of 1992. Remember when the famed strategist James Carville said, "It's the economy, stupid"? Here we are again. A brutal jobs report confirming some suspicions that the economy could be in trouble. Government data shows only 114,000 jobs were created last month, the unemployment rate rising to 4.3%. Now, it is the highest unemployment rate in this country since October 2021. For example, there are now 4.6 million people working part-time who actually want a full-time job. And it comes days after a report this week that shows the number of open jobs in this country continues to fall, meaning it's getting harder to find a job. Now, do not be fooled at all by those claps. A massive sell-off occurred on Wall Street throughout the day today. The S&P 500, for example, down nearly 2%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, as you can see there, about 1.5%. Warning signs, though, continue to pop up. For example, this week alone, Amazon's CEO said consumers are, quote unquote, being careful on prices. McDonald's leader said lower income consumers as well have pulled back. Now the attention in part turns to the Federal Reserve, as the question now isn't will it start cutting interest rates in September, rather by how much. For example, the Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren today writing, quote, "The jobs data is flashing red." Jay Powell, the Fed chair, she says needs to cancel his summer vacation and cut rates now, not wait 6 weeks. Remember, polls have consistently told us, no matter when we've looked at them over the last year or so, issue number one for Americans is the economy. That is likely not changing anytime soon. We begin tonight with Kevin O'Leary from O'Leary Ventures, Shark Tank fame, of course, friend of the show as well. Kevin, a Friday evening. Thanks for being with us here on the Hill. Thanks for being back. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Yep. So economy on the brink, labor market on the brink, none of the above, all of the above. Where are we?
No, this is just one data set. It was a weak jobs report, but let me give you the numbers internally because I study these things in some detail. This is a situation where not a lot of people lost their jobs on this report, but not a lot of new people were hired. So you're kind of in this status where it's a light report. It's one single signal. You kind of need three of these to actually get a trend. So yeah, the market corrected, but the market's had such a great run. To get a correction like this is just garden variety correction. Nobody should panic. Growth rate's still 3%. Employment rate's still relatively low long term, but again, it's one data set. So you don't make big economic decisions on one data report. But there's no question, there's some signals. I look at rental rates for student housing in the Boston area around all the big universities there. It's softened 25%. So there's softening coming. It looks still to me like a soft landing.
Okay. Since the Biden administration has been in place last 40 months or so, I think 2 out of the worst jobs numbers have come in the last 4 months. Speaking of the trend, we'll see where it goes. I wonder where you think this economy is going to be in, let's say, mid-October when voters start to either send in their early ballots or head to the polls in early November.
I think you called it right earlier. Any election, it's always about the economy, stupid. And so it's kind of that month, what does it look like? You're really making a decision. I know there's a lot of rhetoric going on and each party. I'm very fortunate because, I work on a bipartisan basis in real estate. And so I talk to, in syndicating debt and equity, to a lot of big Democratic investors that happen to be advisors to VP Harris, as I do with the Trump team. Because I'm bipartisan, I'm an investor. Investing is kind of like, it's investing. And I got some interesting feedback in the last 48 hours. About 20% of the big donors on the Harris side having a little bit of buyer's remorse about not running a process because they've seen all the press you guys have given them just with the coronation strategy. What if they'd run a process and suck the energy and all the media and social media out of the market for 5 weeks? That could have been interesting. And if she is the best, she would have risen to the top just like Cream does. Look, that's just what they're saying. My point of view is I don't blame her for not bringing up policy. She should just rant and rave saying, I'm not Trump until the August 7th because she's raising so much money. But then she's got to talk policy. And I don't know what that looks like. And nobody does because she's like a blank sheet of paper. She was an inconsequential VP. Not that that's bad. Every VP is inconsequential. They get no media. She got none until 12 days ago. Now she's the it kid. However, there's an example of an it kid a few years ago up in Canada, that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Nobody looked at his background. Nobody looked at his policies. He was the it kid. That country is on its knees. He wiped it out. He had no executional skills. So are Americans going to basically hire or, basically bring a president that's another Justin Trudeau? I hope not.
Okay. By the way, we're getting to the process on Kamala Harris here later in the show. I promise you, Kevin. And we've been asking these questions about what her policies are because that's what I care about. I got about another minute for you, so let me rip through a couple here. Elizabeth Warren, lower rates now. She right or wrong?
I love Elizabeth Warren. I don't agree with anything she says. She's a wildly successful politician with sound bites. She rants and raves, raises taxes, penalizes entrepreneurs. I come from her home state. My family was born there. We left, of course. Are you kidding? I wouldn't stay there. I moved to Florida. But she's very successful. She makes a lot of noise, and I think the market's the market. By the way, rates have already gone down today. Yep. The 10-year is under 5%. It's not just Powell. It's what the 10-year and 30-year bond does and the 2-year bond. They're already corrected. So, they're already getting relief. But Elizabeth Warren's policies are against American entrepreneurship, but I still love her.
10-year at 3.8, I believe, right now. Let me ask you about this because you said on this show, Kevin, the other day, Jamie Dimon, the head of J.P. Morgan Chase, that the word in the circles that you run in is that he would or want to be potentially, if Trump is elected, the Treasury Secretary for him. There was a op-ed from Jamie Dimon in the Wall Street Journal or in the Washington Post today. He never mentioned Donald Trump. He never mentioned Kamala Harris. And here's what he said. He said, we need to elect a president who is dedicated to the ideals that define and unite us and who is committed to restoring our faith in America and our indispensable role in the world. Such a person could be one of our greatest presidents and put us on a path that is worthy of the American people. I'm reading that, Kevin, and I'm going, wait a minute. Who's he talking about here? What's his future? Do you think he's setting up for a possible run down the line?
I think Jamie Dimon is one of the smartest politicians we've ever seen that's not a politician because he's really not, he's in the middle because he doesn't know what's going to happen next, and that's very smart. I'm a client of J.P. Morgan. I think he would be great for either party. We're going to need some really great talent in these mandates, and he would be terrific in Treasury.
You think he runs
He'd be terrific in any mandate. And I know he wants the job. He wants to. Everybody knows that on Wall Street. And I think he's just playing it cool, waiting to see what happens next. Everybody's waiting for August 7th when Vice President Harris brings some policy. I need to know inflation, border, international, and energy. Give it to me.
Speaking of give it to me real quick, you think he runs for president, Jamie Dimon, at any point or no?
No. Okay. He's gonna come into the administration under one of these presidents, and then he'll run later.
All right. Kevin O'Leary, thank you, sir, on a Friday evening. Appreciate the time. We'll talk to you again soon.
Take care.
You got it. All right, joining me today throughout the hour, Scott Bolden, NewsNation political contributor. Aaron Perini is a Republican strategist. Max Rose, the former Democratic congressman from New York, and the professor, Lauren Wright, Princeton University NewsNation contributor as well. Hello to you all. Nice to have you all in. Hey. This is the issue, the economy. It's been that way the whole time. Yeah. It's not going to change between now and November 5th. It was interesting, Lauren, to hear Kevin O'Leary there say, look, this is just sort of one data set, but I wonder if Democrats should be worried.
Well, I look at what voters are thinking.
Okay.
Because we can argue about micro and macroeconomic trends. We can say Biden administration's doing well on such and such variables. But then why do 70% of Americans think they were better off under Trump financially? And why do 65% of them blame that on the Biden administration? They clearly are not just fools that are linking the two together. They feel, especially because of inflation, because prices are up 20 to 30% across the board, from rent to food to everything, they notice a difference and they feel a recession's coming. They feel a softening. And so as long as they feel that way, it's either a self-fulfilling prophecy or it just has a tremendous electoral impact.
We have seen the job market go this way. The jobs numbers go that way. What happens if it continues and you're running as the kind of de facto incumbent?
It's not that it's the economy stupid. It's inflation stupid.
Okay.
And here's the crazy thing. In order for inflation to cool down, because really what those Americans who you're talking about, really what they're looking for is not a stabilization of prices. They actually want deflation. They want it to go back a couple of years. The only way that could happen is if the economy starts to cool down, interest rates go down. So in some oddly contrarian way,
it's wild.
This is good news for the Democrats, because what we've seen is that when there's a rip-roaring economy, when the market is going crazy, when my barber's talking to me about buying Bitcoin, right? People are still pissed off.
See the story in the New York Times today about the op-ed about this being the Bitcoin election? I've been talking about that for a while. Yeah. But anyways,
my barber made a lot of money.
Is this good news or bad news? Is good news, or is the sort of the cake baked on prices?
Republicans need to be messaging more on this. The Trump team just put out a digital video hitting Kamala on the economy and talking about this. This is voters' number one issue. Depending on the state, it's between this and immigration, but they sit at 1 and 2. And Republicans, instead of coming out and hitting Harris immediately on the economy and on immigration, they got caught in the food fight about whether or not her title was border czar and took that bait.
You think that was a mistake?
I think it was a mistake, because they took that bait instead of saying, you know what, call her what you want, but look at the facts here. People don't like the economy. They don't like immigration. It's Kamala's fault.
It's not the messaging. It's the messenger. He wants to talk about race and women and misogyny, and the Republicans need to be talking about the economy and immigration. Let me comment on this report. It's just one report, and the stock market has dropped 900 points. How many times have we seen the stock market bounce right back the next day or two when you have one of these reports that come out? And I would raise the issue that this jobs report is good for interest rates coming down.
Interest rates will come down.
Will come down, and inflation, the cooling of the market. But one thing that we don't talk about enough is that immigration and these new jobs are a big part of our economy. And immigration, people coming across the border illegally, is down.
So Republicans are pointing to native-born jobs are down while immigration jobs are up. One of their talking points that they're focusing on.
I don't know what native means. The Fed doesn't like to look political. And so Elizabeth Warren coming out and saying drop interest rates right now, should interest rates get dropped by the Fed, Republicans will be able to say, look, they're doing the bidding of Democrats to try and help the economy ahead of the election. I'm just saying that's going to be the argument.
She's been anti-Jerome Powell no matter what he does for a very long time.
He's got one of the most important and one of the politically worst jobs going forward. Let me leave.
Well, just come out saying that the Fed shouldn't be independent.
Let me leave you with this. Top campaign issues in these swing states. This is our polling from Emerson College and The Hill. In Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, somewhere between 40 to 50% say the economy is the top issue. In Arizona, it's immigration, the economy, number 2. Still to come here on the Hill over the next 45 minutes. The head of the Secret Service out tonight with new details about Trump's assassination attempt.
There was clearly radio transmissions that may have happened on that local radio net that we did not have.
Plus, an emotional homecoming. Evan Gershkovich seen here hugging his mom. He's back in the United States. So how did she play a role in the negotiations with Russia? The new details out tonight about how she helped bring her son home. And political jabs and punches. The Olympics weighing in today on how one fighter was allowed to step into the ring. Some Republicans in this town trying to tie it to the presidential election. We are speaking with George Foreman III. You are watching The Hill. Stay with us. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation, where in Washington today we saw a mea culpa from the Secret Service. The interim director taking full and sole responsibility for the assassination attempt on Donald Trump on July 13th in Butler, Pennsylvania. As we know, an attendee died that day. Earlier this week, one of the wounded finally released from the local hospital. Here's what the interim head of the agency said in a press conference this afternoon. He said that agents were told of a suspicious man at 5:45 in the evening local time. That was roughly 25 minutes before the shooting. Neither the counter-sniper teams nor the president's security detail were aware of a shooter being on the roof. The shooter's location was close enough to have coverage. Secret Service agents also did not know about a gun that was focused on Trump until the first shots were fired. Ronald Rowe, the interim head, also said today that local law enforcement should not be to blame.
In no way should any state or local agency supporting us in Butler on July 13th be held responsible for a Secret Service failure.
Aaron, you've been to, I think you've said like 100 of these rallies, and you were aghast at the idea that they were blaming local police at the beginning.
Absolutely. But they did blame local police, and local police had to come out and push against a federal group and say, no, this was not our fault. This was their failure. And it was the failure of Secret Service. It is their job to protect that site. And anytime, all of the weeks that they have spent right now blaming local law enforcement for this makes it that much harder for any protectee in the country to show up in any jurisdiction anywhere, and local law enforcement feel that they can trust Secret Service to have their back here. This is Secret Service sites. This is Secret Service failure. And they owned up to it today. 2 weeks too late. And look at what they did to the Butler police, the sheriff, everybody, and dragging them in the mud before they owned up to it. It's bad.
But the Secret Service has owned this from day one. They did do the blame game partially, but they've owned it from day one. But this is a colossal failure. But for that roof not being covered and no one seeing it, this would never have happened. That's a fact. It's like everybody got lined up, everybody's on separate lines, and they're bringing the president up, and he's talking, and everybody's paying attention to that, and all of a sudden there's this big elephant in the room that, hey, there's a roof. And by the way, the participants on the outside saw it. They were taking pictures. They were telling the police. And this guy was up on the roof with a rifle, and no one knew it. At least not, it doesn't seem like Secret Service knew it. It's just incredible. Like, it's just a colossal failure. Like, we forgot to cover that.
So
that's what ought to be investigated.
Here's the protectees right now, in part. This is just part of the challenge that the Secret Service has before them. Right now, they are protecting President Biden, Vice President Harris, whoever she will eventually choose as her running mate here in the upcoming days, Donald Trump, former president, Republican nominee for president, J.D. Vance, the vice presidential nominee, and RFK Jr., who just got protection in the recent, week to 10 days or so, along with their families. Max, former member of Congress, what's Congress going to eventually do about this? Like, we heard from Ronald Rowe today talk about making sure they have all the resources within DHS. Is this a money issue?
It's definitively a money issue. Presidents are also living longer. Now, of course, the Republican Party does want to cut the federal workforce by 50%. And I don't know how they will also talk about resourcing the Secret Service more. At what point or another, we have to talk about which elements of the federal government the Republican Party supports and wants to expand, and what actually falls under their Project 2025 plan to dramatically diminish.
The 50% number, like some have have thrown but Donald Trump's never talked about cutting the federal government 50%.
Who are they?
That's really the only one that matters.
Can I just ask, and I'm not I really want to know, I'm not trying to attack you, how would the money issue have solved the assassination attempt? Because I think a lot of people looking at it thought it was a competence issue.
No, well, look, I think that ultimately it's a manning issue. And when you have more personnel, you can be there earlier, you can do pre-briefings, you can have layers of control. Of course, resourcing are not the only thing. But you must admit that there's a political issue here that we have got to go back to, which is the fact that you cannot pick and choose what elements of government, like you can't.
Actually, you
So let me ask you this.
You can't talk about writ large. We hate the federal government. We want to cut it all. We hate federal bureaucrats. We hate the deep state. But then when a problem like this happens, you say,
I gotta run here. But if you're saying it's a political issue, the federal government's run by Joe Biden.
Sure.
Could you, then you could sort of I could throw it right back at you and ask those questions about.
Issue across any federal law enforcement, Secret Service, and Capitol Police. Capitol Police keeps having to bring in more detail because they keep getting assigned to lawmakers with credible threats against them. There are multiple rank and file members now that have additional protection for them and their families. It's a federal issue.
I'll give 10 seconds.
Eventually, I just would like to know which agencies the Republicans want to cut and which they want to expand upon, because this is all they talk about is how much they hate the deep state. All they talk about is how much they want to fire every single bureaucrat they can come across. But then when a problem happens, they get right behind resourcing.
I gotta run. There's still more ahead here on the Hill. Kamala Harris's search for a VP nears the finish line. Who she might choose. How one Democratic lawmaker is calling out some in his own party, suggesting religious beliefs are behind their complaints. This is the Hill on NewsNation. Back in a few. All right, welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation. It is all but official. The Democratic National Committee revealing today that Vice President Kamala Harris has secured enough support of delegates to become the Democratic nominee for president. An historic 35 days that we have witnessed. After President Biden's disastrous debate performance, Democratic leadership here in Washington made it clear they did not think he could beat Donald Trump, and then essentially forced him out of the race. He then endorsed his vice president, Kamala Harris, and Democrats quickly coalesced around her. Now, without ever appearing on a primary ballot at the top of the ticket, and with a select group, give or take, of roughly some 4,000 delegates choosing her online, Harris will officially head to the Democratic National Convention in a few weeks as the party's leader going forward. Now, if it seems like fiction, remember this. Just hours before the now historic debate, I asked the head of the DNC if there was ever a scenario in which Joe Biden could be replaced.
In the end of the day, Joe Biden is our nominee, and Joe Biden is going to win this election. Folks, stop with all these conspiracy theories. This is not the West Wing or some weird thing.
Well, here we are. Tonight, NewsNation can report interviews with the top contenders with the vice president will happen this weekend. President Biden says he has talked to Harris about the search. Her announcement could come any day now. It will definitely happen by Tuesday when the vice president and her running mate will appear at a rally in Pennsylvania. Several of the candidates, by the way, in consideration, including Governors Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, Andy Beshear of Kentucky, Tim Walz of Minnesota, canceled weekend plans, sparking more speculation. Max, former Democratic congressman, here's what I want to ask you about. Congressman Moskowitz, a Democrat, has come out and has basically put the post up on the screen. There's a story in the Hill right now. Progressives sound alarm as Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro VP pick stock rises. And here's what Moskowitz says. These progressives don't want a Jew. Let's say it out loud. Imagine if moderate Dems said they didn't want a certain minority. The condemnations would be deafening, yet now we hear much silence. Former Democratic member of Congress, Jewish as well. Is there something to that as he calls them out?
No, it's a poor statement. I mean, look, the Progressive Caucus is saying they do not want someone who has been as strong in his support of Israel as Governor Shapiro has. Now, I respectfully disagree with that. I support his position on Israel and moreover, I think that he'd be a fantastic pick, particularly due to the impact that he would have on the Pennsylvania race. But that's an unfair statement. Okay. I mean, that's not with a progressive caucus.
I'm sorry.
No, I wanted to ask you, some of Obama world, David Plouffe, Stephanie Cutter, is now coming into Kamala Harris's campaign team. It's not like she's letting folks go. She's bringing those who successfully helped Barack Obama win in. What do you make of it?
I make of it being the political dream team on the Democratic side. We've seen this show before with Barack Obama and building that coalition. Kamala Harris is really no different, except she's got even deeper roots in the black community, in the black Democratic voters, with black women and black men.
Deeper roots than Obama?
Deeper, yes, actually, from an institutional standpoint, she went to Howard University. She also joined the AKAs and what have you. Barack Obama never had any deep African-American institutional connections, per se. He certainly was African-American, a great president, but this goes even deeper, and there's more excitement about her. It feels like Barack Obama's run for the presidency.
Let me ask you, Aaron, because there is a fundraising numbers out today. Show the numbers up on the screen that shows there was a massive haul for Kamala Harris. Yeah. Some Republicans might say, my gosh, that's a big number. That's a big total. You see the numbers there on the screen. You actually have a different take on this.
I do. And it involves down ballot Republicans. It involves the Senate races right now. Because if you look at what has been reserved by down ballot Republicans right now in key swing states on broadcast radio and cable, and obviously reservation numbers in terms of money that campaigns are putting up right now to reserve TV time, is we are looking at $360 million for Democrats and $233 million for Republicans. In key swing states, let's look at Wisconsin. Right now, Democrats have $38.9 million reserved. Republicans have $8. This is a huge disparity that Republicans, listen, when Joe Biden was at the top of the ticket, and I'm not calling out any specific race here, but when Joe Biden was at the top of the ticket, for any Republican down ballot, you could feel a little bit better about it. You could feel that, hey, maybe they did take their foot off the gas. This is Kamala's fundraising numbers, these Senate fundraising numbers, these Senate numbers, and there are groups out there that like Senate Leadership Fund that's putting up money to try to stand in the breach. But this is a warning sign. Republicans, red sirens,
yes or
pay
no,
attention.
real quick.
About
the money.
No, I think we tend to read a little bit too much into this. It's going to be more money spent on any race this year than and both will have plenty of money.
All right.
In hand.
Meantime, 3 Americans back home on U.S. soil tonight after being greeted by President Biden, Vice President Harris, and their families. Among the Americans released, the journalist Evan Gershkovich and the former United States Marine Paul Whelan. You can see him there. The Wall Street Journal out with new reporting now on how Gershkovich's mother was a key reason in getting her son released. She traveled to Russia, for example, pleaded with leaders such as President Biden and the German Chancellor. Joining us now is Diane Foley, the mother of James Foley, an American freelance journalist who was abducted and killed by ISIS in 2014. She has started the James W. Foley Legacy Foundation to promote the return of Americans detained abroad. Diane, very nice to meet you. It is an honor to speak with you. Thank you for being with us here on the Hill. Obviously, a great moment for this country last night, seeing those Americans return back home. And you clearly have a unique perspective on all of this. And I wonder what was going through your mind as the news came out and you saw those images come in.
Just miraculous in many ways. When I think that 10 years ago this month, our son and 3 other Americans were abandoned by our administration at that time. And now for our country to work so hard to bring these folks home, to me is just a miracle and shows a lot of moral courage, in my opinion. Both the Trump administration and Biden administration have shown that our country must prioritize the return of our citizens, and I'm very grateful.
You know, it strikes me when you use the word abandon as it relates to your son, and I wonder what you think the right policy for the government should be going forward, because as you know, there are some who have made the argument that if we negotiate, it sort of fuels bad behavior down the line.
Well, we must focus collectively on deterrence and prevention. There's no question about that, Blake. You're absolutely right. But we must do both. We must have the moral courage to have the backs of brave Americans who are innocent and targeted simply because they're American. So but you're right. We must also work on deterrence and prevention. And I think the kind of coalition that brought about this recent freedom for these folks is what we need to do when we talk about deterrence also. We must make it hurt to target our people.
You have the James Foley Legacy Foundation. As you note, I was on the foundation's website. There are more than 40 Americans that are still around the world being unjustly detained. I wonder what you think, Diane, the policy specific to Russia should be. With Vladimir Putin running that nation, and we've seen it time and time again. Like, how do we deal with Putin?
Very difficult. That's why this is so amazing. I mean, this was the fruit of many months of work, and lots of people trying to make this work, because people like Putin are just in it for themselves. I mean, they don't care. So it's very difficult. I have to applaud that kind of shrewd diplomacy, because I was very worried about those folks in Russia, and still am about those who remain. There still are a good number who remain held in Russia and China. Those are the two big places these days.
Diane Foley, I could talk to you all night, but we got a TV show here to do. It was very nice to meet you, very nice to speak with you. I wish you and your family all the best. Diane Foley, thank you.
Thanks a million. Take care.
You got it. All right. Still to come here from the Hill, the IOC counterpunch, how Olympic officials are responding to a female boxer caught up in a gender firestorm. You know who's joining us on the other side of the break? George Foreman III. This story making the rounds, and we're taking it head on here on the Hill.
Both sides are trying to play you on this. They're both full of it.
Dan Abrams, calling it like he sees it.
I heard your opening, and I thought you're actually spot on.
No agendas, just the facts. Dan Abrams Live, weeknights at 9/8 Central, only on NewsNation.
Angela Carini to abandon her chance for an Olympic medal in Paris after her opponent from Algeria delivered a powerful punch, sending the Italian to her knees right there in the ring. Now, the match has since triggered a worldwide controversy, worldwide debate around gender identity in sports. It stems from the Algerian boxer Iman Khalif being disqualified from the 2023 World Championships after failing a gender eligibility test at that event. Today, the International Olympic Committee, which is a different body, a different group that oversees all of this, is saying everything is a misunderstanding.
The Algerian boxer was born female, was registered female, lived her life as a female, boxed as a female, has a female passport. This is not a transgender case. Testosterone is not a perfect test. Many women can have testosterone which is in what would be called male levels, and still be women and still compete as women.
Back here in Washington, some Republicans are crying foul with posts, for example, from Ben Carson, Lauren Boebert, Ted Cruz, and more highlighting the story. Some even saying, what might Kamala Harris do about it? How would she respond to this? What are her beliefs on all this? Joining us now is the son of legendary heavyweight boxing champion, a fighter in his own right, George Foreman III. George, thanks for being with us here on the Hill. I didn't want to talk to the politicians about this. I wanted to speak to a fighter. So thanks for being here with us.
Decision.
If you were training a woman in the Olympics and they had to go up against her, would you tell them to take the fight?
Yeah, with stuff like this, you have to approach it, not as a politician, not as a biologist, not as a doctor, but as a coach. I'm an amateur boxing coach. I'm also a professional boxer. And the first thing we think about is I got to get my fighter in and out of that ring safely, back to their family safe. That's number one. And that's what the rules are about. And not only are the rules important and the safety is important, but with the biggest stage ever, the Olympic sports, the perception of safety, the perception of fairness is important, right? Because there's still a lot to learn about what happened. We don't know all the details, but they miss it on perception. And if they're right, then big misunderstanding, right? But if they're wrong, this is a big deal. People can get hurt. There's a reason 175-pounders can't fight 135-pounders as men.
Right. Yeah, of course.
Someone could get killed. There's a reason even me, I'm 18-0. I can't fight somebody who they don't want me to fight people with losing records because someone could get killed. And then, of course, we let men and women fight competitively, generally speaking, because the danger of someone getting killed, even though Clarissa Shields fights men all the time, but as a sport, I think we have to be careful. And I think even if they're right, they miss it on the perception of safety and fairness. And the Olympics can't survive like that. Not with a sport that's as dangerous as boxing.
Yeah, so there's always been controversy, or not always, recently especially been controversy with the IOC. Michael Phelps was up here testifying up on Capitol Hill a few weeks ago. We had a congressman on the show as it related to the World Anti-Doping Agency, sort of in what Congress may or may not do with them, right? So there's long been questions around the IOC. They have a different standard than what happened with the World Boxing Championships. Is the IOC equipped? Do they have the right rules in place as you see it?
I think they may have it's about the intentions. Do they have the right intentions? I think they probably wanted to make sure they made the right decision politically, the right decision maybe for the media. Maybe that's what they thought. But I think what they said, are we making the right decisions for the competitors, the men, the women, the coaches, the competitors from all places? Are we making the right decision for their safety? And do we have buy-in? I think if they had started there, the decision may have been different. And I feel so bad because the Algerian competitor and the Italian competitor, they both deserve compassion. I'm sure the Algerian competitor didn't want one of the crowning moments in her life to be mired with controversy. And then the Italian competitor, if she did fight a biological woman, which maybe we find out she did, then maybe she wished she had kept going. And had they made that clear to her with transparency and data and facts, maybe she would have kept going and won the fight. Has she fought a biological woman with more testosterone than women normally have, maybe the testosterone of a normal male her whole life, maybe she would have prepared by fighting bigger, stronger women or fighting men in the gym to prepare. She deserves that ability. This is what we're talking about as a coach. And if we do find out when we have more information that she did indeed fight a biological male, she's lucky she got out safely. She could have seriously got hurt. So I have compassion for both, and I think we should all have compassion for both because boxing, among all sports, is supposed to bring people together from all walks of life. This has become divisive.
George Foreman III, appreciate the time, appreciate the perspective. This is why I want to talk to you and not the politicians, because you gave it to us straight. Thank you, sir. Have a great one. We'll talk to you again, hopefully.
Thank you.
You got it. So that's the boxing side of this.
You're great. That interview. He was fantastic.
God bless him.
Oh my gosh, he was great.
George Foreman III for Senate.
Exactly. My goodness gracious. This is not a transgendered issue. I don't know why politicians in America are issuing.
Of course. We know why they're doing it.
Because they want to make up something political.
Because they got nothing to run on.
Exactly.
They're saying it's about men and women's sports.
Whatever you're going to say,
whether you're transgender or not.
It's not. She's not transgendered. She was born a woman, at least based on the facts that we have. She's a big, strong woman. I can't help it if the Italian fighter got hit by somebody that hits harder than someone else. If you believe she's a transgendered male or that somehow she is perpetrating a fraud, then tell us that. Otherwise, why are we talking about transgender when she registered as a woman and her coaches and IOC said she's a woman?
Let me get a woman's perspective here for a second.
She's a woman.
Let me get a woman's perspective here for a second.
These organizations just have tremendous discretion, and the rules are extremely inconsistent, is what we're seeing. And so I think a lot of people watching this say, well, why doesn't the Olympics have the same standards as the World Championships? It doesn't make sense. It seems arbitrary.
I think his point about safety was perfect. Maybe there was a disparity in the boxers. Maybe she should have been fighting somebody a little bit lighter, the Italian boxer. I think that was a perfect point.
All right, so let's come here on the Hill. JD Vance slides into TikTok just as the social media platform runs into trouble with the DOJ. We'll explain. And on balance, just a few minutes away, Elizabeth Pran in for Leland tonight. She'll talk to Caroline Sunshine of the Trump campaign. We are not done. We still got a lot more here on the Hill. Back in a few. All right, welcome back here to the Hill. So the Department of Justice today says it's suing TikTok over child privacy violations. The DOJ contends that TikTok illegally collected children's data and allowed children under the age of 13 to create accounts. It follows Congress passing a bill in April forcing the Chinese owner ByteDance to sell the social media app or face a nationwide ban. But it's not stopping the presidential campaigns. J.D. Vance officially joining TikTok. Kamala Harris joined TikTok a week or so ago. What is this all about?
Well, it's about bad conduct on the part of TikTok. TikTok had a deal with the FTC. They didn't monitor the deal. They broke that deal. They breached that deal. And what's really bad is the people registering for this child section of TikTok, they didn't even monitor that. So you could have adults on there with children, and they didn't monitor that the way they were supposed to. So bad conduct, strong lawsuit.
You think no politician should be on this?
I just don't believe it. Listen, on Capitol Hill right now, they're putting out emails saying no TikTok on anybody's phone anymore because they consider it a security threat. I understand bringing your message to where people are. I'm a communicator by profession, but I'm not. China's got enough information on me. We don't need to give them more.
If Rose runs for Congress again, he's jumping on TikTok.
Why aren't you on it now, then?
Are you on it now?
No.
But you're jumping on
Maybe tonight. Maybe tonight. But look, now here's what's great. J.D. Vance can do 10-second clips all about how much he hates women who don't have kids and question what ethnicity Kamala Harris is. And look, it's going to be really, really great. The Republican Party is going to be so elated by his continued messaging.
I think it's unreasonable to expect any candidate not to have it.
Say it again.
It's unreasonable to expect any candidate not to have that. I understand the security threats. I don't have it. My social media ineptitude matches perfectly with the security concerns, and I don't have to have it on my phone. But it is a good way to get your message.
First time we talked about this, I took it off my phone right here.
I
did.
Finally, tonight, we wanted to say hello from our hill to yours, to the community. We're talking, of course, about politics in the Olympics, right? Did you know there's a community in Seattle known as Olympic Hills? Olympic Hills is in King County, which overwhelmingly voted Democrat in the 2020 election. Joe Biden received 75% of the vote there. Olympic Hills is represented by the Democratic Congress.